is a rider. You gon' rap, you gon' slang for them dollar. You want prime pussy, nigga, no problem.
Tourism is back in the Gateway City, but this is only a recent phenomenon. Because St. Louis was at one time the murder capital of the U.S. during the height of the COVID pandemic. But none of those murders would match the blinding media frenzy given one murder for hire plot that shocked the city in the year 2016. This tragedy would wreck a dining staple in one particular restaurant in St. Louis. Not that restaurant, this one. This jewel in the restaurant industry used to be the world's famous Sweetie Pies. That is, until the co-owner of Sweetie Pies, a one Mr. Tim Norman, would hire two people to shoot and kill his own nephew, Mr. Andre Montgomery, and then attempt to cash in on a $450,000 life insurance policy that he had taken out on his nephew months earlier. But don't fool yourself. This particular murder for hire mystery was no ordinary case, and this certainly is no ordinary restaurant. If it were, I don't believe that Mrs. Oprah Winfrey would have engineered a television reality series behind it called Welcome to Sweetie Pies. If you look closely in that photo, just before you can see Oprah with the family and cast. Welcome to Sweetie Pies ran on Oprah's own network for 9 seasons from 2011 to 2018, documenting the operations around the family-owned restaurant. It was one of the first reality shows to premiere on Oprah Winfrey's network when it first launched. But Sweetie Pies was already on the fast track long before Oprah. The owner, Robbie Montgomery, was a world-famous singer long before she struggled to open Sweetie Pies. Miss Robbie Montgomery, born June 16, 1940, is noted for being one of the original Ikeettes in the Ike and Tina Turner Revue in the 1960s. After her tenure as an Ikeette, she was a member of the Mirettes and then became a night tripper for Dr. John in the 1970s. Montgomery was a backing vocalist for such acts as Stevie Wonder, Barbra Streisand, the Rolling Stones, and Joe Cocker. She later created Sweetie Pies franchise after her lung collapse and she could no longer sing. Robbie took her mother's soul food recipes and created Sweetie Pies, St. Louis soul food restaurant run by Miss Robbie and her family. The company had been in business for over 20 years and at its peak operated 19 stores in 9 states. Sweetie Pies Upper Crust had shuttered the doors of its St. Louis location nearly a week after the singer's son was found guilty on murder for hire charges. Here are the facts of the murder for hire plot. In the days leading up to Montgomery's murder, a one Mrs. Tarika Ellis, an exotic dancer residing in Memphis, Tennessee, communicated by phone with Tim Montgomery and informed him that she was planning to be in St. Louis in a couple of days. Tarika was not planning on being there on her own accord, but because Tim summoned her there to complete the murder for hire plot. On March 13, 2016, the day before Montgomery was murdered, celebrity Tim Norman boarded a flight from Los Angeles LAX Airport to St. Louis Lambert International Airport to meet up with Tarika. On March 14, 2016, Tarika and Norman began to communicate using burner phones activated on that same day. Tarika also used that burner phone to communicate with Tim's nephew Montgomery and learn his physical whereabouts. For this murder plot to succeed, without a hitch, it was important that he trust in her feminine wiles and not to be on guard as he would with another man. Many men in history have been driven to the grave in trusting the beauty or sexuality of a woman for nefarious purposes. After Tarika learned Montgomery's whereabouts, she placed a call to Norman in order to greenlight the assassination. On the night of Montgomery's murder, a man by the name of Trayvell Hill met up with Tim Norman in St. Louis. Norman told Hill that a stripper by the name of Tarika Ellis would be calling him shortly with his nephew's location for the hit. The address that would soon be splashed all over the news was 3964 Natural Bridge Avenue in the city of St. Louis. After receiving that call from Tarika, Hill entered Montgomery's residence under the false pretenses of using his telephone. Then he fatally shot Montgomery with a .380 caliber handgun at 8:02 p.m. Mr. Hill then ran out of the home and disposed of the gun as well as his burner phone. St. Louis Metropolitan Police arrived shortly thereafter, responded to the shooting call at the 3900 block of Natural Bridge Road. When police arrived, they found 21-year-old Andre Montgomery unconscious and suffering from gunshot wounds. He was pronounced dead on the scene. Additionally, investigators found a second man who was armed, heard gunshots in the house, and headed for the home to help. A third man saw him approaching the house with a gun and, fearing for his own safety, shot at the second man, hitting him in the arm and chest. The second man was taken to the hospital, where he was listed in critical yet stable condition. Investigators would find much later in the case that Tarika Ellis's phone would place her in the vicinity of the murder at the time of the homicide. Immediately following Montgomery's murder, Ellis placed a call to Norman, and then she began her travels back to Memphis, Tennessee. Evidence revealed during trial showed that Norman paid $10,000 to Tarika, the exotic dancer, to track his nephew's location. To keep his hands clean, Norman then used a friend to pay $5,000 to the shooter, Trayville Anthony Hill, after Hill killed Montgomery. Before Montgomery's murder, Tarika's bank account was in the minus. However, after the murder, she deposited several checks totaling $9,000 into various bank accounts. Following Montgomery's murder, several remembrance and grieving scenes were filmed into the Welcome to Sweetie Pie's reality show. In these scenes, you can see the mastermind of the murder plot, Tim, faking innocence. Additionally, clips show him going out to the crime scene with his mother. Here is that footage from the OWN network.
How do you make sense of losing your son and your grandson to violence? Just seeing this takes me back. Andre was like somebody that I wanted to take under my wing and make sure that he made it. And my goal was to get him through high school. And so when I did that, I really wanted him to go back home, because St. Louis is a city where black men are killing each other. And he came back and then was there like 4 or 5 days and got killed. So that's heartbreaking. And Linda, with Andre's passing, does that bring up the memories of your son, Aaron?
Yes, it does, because the fact that they both was young men. You know, my son, he got killed because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Andre, when he got killed, he was trying to make music.
Charles and I are the only boys left in this generation to the spot where Andre lost his life, because I had not been there yet. I don't think Mom had been there either. You know, we're still in the same street, basically, as my grandmother's house, Natural Bridge. So you can see Grandma's house right from here.
Natural Bridge is the main street that goes from one end of the city to the next. Everything happens on Natural Bridge. All the crime, all the fast racing. This is it.
Yeah, that's it.
They say he came out and used the phone, so they had to shoot him right here on this porch.
We've lost a lot of family members here on this street. Andre, as of late, and then before Andre, my father. And in between that was Linda's son, Monique's brother, Aaron, who was like my brother. And it's all on this one street, a few blocks from each other. Right across from Grandma's house.
Yeah, that's the sad thing about it.
Since Andre's passing, I haven't gone through this part of the city. And really, I've been avoiding it.
I mean, it's like all up and down the street.
Yeah.
We must stop killing, but there's just signs. Oh, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm getting sick to my stomach just seeing this place.
Get back in the car, I take it 2 lights down the street. Just 2 lights to the spot where my dad got killed.
Help with my tie.
What the hell is wrong with your hair? Come over here, let me see.
I'm not done yet.
I can't believe of all times you get your hair done for everything else and you didn't get it done for this. It's ridiculous. This past spring, my grandson, Andre, was shot and killed while visiting St. Louis.
I try and remember the good times with Andre and who he really was as a person.
I tell you what, we are all so proud of you. You did it. I knew you could do it.
I'm just glad that I got the opportunity to graduate. Because
Me
I know
too.
if I was still in Texas, I probably wouldn't graduate.
So why you think you wouldn't have graduated had you stayed home?
Because one, only time I would have got help with schoolwork would have been right. We had a game coming up, and for two, the people there, I don't know. I guess I would have been fighting, got kicked out of school plenty of times. I'm not sure where I'd be without grandma's help, but I know I wouldn't be graduating high school. I want to thank you for helping me. Let me.
On March 21st, 2016, a mere 7 days after the murder, Norman contacted the insurance company in an attempt to collect the life insurance policy he had obtained on his nephew. According to the criminal complaint, Norman allegedly conspired with Ellis, an exotic dancer, to kill his nephew so that he could get the life insurance payout. The policy contained a $200,000 accidental death rider that would pay out if Montgomery died of something other than natural causes, and a $50,000 term rider that would pay if Montgomery died within 10 years of the policy's issuance. In testimony during the trial, Norman said he helped his nephew move to St. Louis about 18 months before he was killed and supported him financially because he was trying to watch out for Montgomery. He said he sought to be a father figure to his brother's son. Former Sweetie Pie's employees and other character witnesses testified that Norman and his nephew had a close relationship. In court, Dennis said all the testimony from the scheme's co-conspirators was backed up in the trial by text, call records, and location data. She said Norman created an image of being a mentor and a father figure to all these people, but it's fiction. Lawyer Leonard said during his closing arguments that Mrs. Ellis testified to get a shorter sentence and said Mr. Hill admitted he was a heavy drug user and that he was hopped up on drugs the day when he killed Montgomery. At trial, Norman testified that he took out the life insurance policy on his nephew to give a long-term customer of family restaurant Y.L. Yagnum some business. Now, Y.L. Yagnum was a life insurance salesman that sold him the policy under false pretenses from 10. The life insurance policy included numerous false statements regarding Montgomery's income, net worth, medical history, employment, and family background. All indications are that YL did not know what was going on to take place in the murder for hire plot. Unfortunately, YL too was sentenced to 3 years in prison for issuing an insurance certificate under false pretenses. Yagnum admitted in his plea agreement that the insurance application included a false information about Montgomery's net worth and background. He also instructed Norman in text messages to impersonate his nephew over the phone with the insurance company. 16 days after Montgomery's murder, Yagnum placed a call to the insurance agency to try to collect the policy. He and Norman were ultimately unsuccessful in obtaining the payout because the insurance agency wasn't provided the final police toxicology and the coroner's reports necessary to process the claim. Now, if you've never heard of Mr. Y.L. Yagnum before, just know that before he sold insurance, he worked as a record producer in the music industry. He was the man that produced rapper Nelly's hit 2000 album, Nellyville. In my opinion, I believe that beyond the murder for hire and insurance money was that this was a case of street justice. You see, at Norman's trial, he admitted that he and his mother hired a private investigator to look for his nephew prior to his death. The reason for the detective was because his nephew left St. Louis after at least $220,000 in cash, jewelry, and other items were stolen in a June 2015 burglary at Robbie Montgomery's home. Norman told jurors he and his mother hired that investigator to find and confront his nephew about the robbery, but he had no intentions of hurting him. In other words, Norman believed he had stolen the money and he was out for revenge. Mr. Tim Norman was ultimately convicted of commissioning the murder for hire plot that killed his nephew and co-star in 2016. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire under the murder for hire statute. Norman was sentenced to life in prison in lieu of the death penalty. The jury's verdict came after deliberating 17 hours over 3 days. Norman held a blank expression as the verdict was read to a courtroom packed with family and friends on both sides of the case. His supporters surrounded his mother right outside the courtroom, who could not believe the verdict and sobbed audibly. U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri, Sailor Fleming, said motive for the murder plot came down to one thing: Norman's greed. Trayvell Anthony Hill was sentenced to 32 years in prison after pleading guilty to shooting Montgomery and receiving payment from Norman. Drika Ellis was given parole after providing prosecutors with direct knowledge of the case as it pertained to Tim Norman.